Megaproject Book Club from the IPMA. So it's our pleasure today to receive this stellar team of 4 professors that made significant contributions to project management, much beyond this particular book. But today we are here to reflect on this recent contribution on Megaproject leaders, reflection on personal life stories. I will sort of outline the rules of the game in a minute, and then I'll hand it over to Natalie, and I'm sure they will introduce themselves in much more details. We will have a short presentation from the authors, around 30 minutes, then followed by questions received in advance, sent by many of you, that we reflect together and coordinated a list of questions to start the discussion. Then if you could please send us more questions during the session and later on in the Q&A box, we'll consolidate those questions as well and direct to each one of the authors to follow the discussion. Okay, so without any further ado, Natalie, the floor, the screen, the show is all yours. Over to you. Let me stop sharing here.
Okay, let me see if I can share the PowerPoint presentation. I hope this is this one. Yeah. Do you see it now? Okay, lovely. So thank you very much, Giuliano, for organizing this seminar. I'm with my colleague Shankar Shankaran, Alphonse, Ralph Muller, and I'm Nathalie Drouin, the Executive Director at CHEOPS and Professor at UQAM and Adjunct Professor at UTS in Australia. So I'm very, very pleased to let me see if I can switch the slides easily. Okay, yeah. So I'm very pleased to present to you with my colleagues our book. And before I begin, I must tell you that this book on the life stories of mega project leaders was also a mega project to carry out. The content of the presentation today, I will present the context, explain the wishes with this book. Alphonse will present the methodology. The results will be discussed by Ralph in terms of insights for personal perspectives, and the conclusion, the reflections, the lessons we learned with this book will be presented by Shankar. So the book brings together 18 well-known academics who interviewed 16 megaproject leaders. Researchers and leaders came from 10 different countries. We had people from Australia, Canada, China, Germany, India, Netherlands, New Zealand, South Korea, Switzerland, and UK. We looked at 14 different projects: bridges, railways, motorways, tunnels, public transportation, hydro crackers, and so on. And we were 4 editors from 4 different countries: Shankar, as I mentioned, Alphonse, Ralph, and myself. I take this opportunity to say thank you to all contributors of the book for their very close collaboration in order to deliver the book on time. In fact, the book, as mentioned, it was a mega project to deliver, and the book was delivered a week before the deadline to submit. So we are very proud of that. And now the book is available on the website of the publisher, Edward Elgert. And the book was also endorsed by 3 well-known academics: Martina Human, Jörg Gimenden, and Tyrone Pitsis. And we had the foreword by Jeff Pinto. When I read a book or when I want to buy a book, I like to know the structure of the book. So that's why I will take a few seconds to present the structure of the book. In the first section, It's really 2 chapters, and we explain the cause, the outline of the book, the reasons of the book. We set the scene for the rest of the book, and then we present the methodological foundations. The second part is the heart of the book. So we have 14 biographical life stories that was story developed by our contributors. And the last section is about the analysis, the findings, and the trends and the lessons we learned with that book. So the wishes, what did we wish to accomplish with this book? First, through the life stories of the leaders, we wish to better understand what they have done to manage successfully these mega projects. And second, we wanted to bring out this more human perspective of our leaders and to provide insights from their stories to advance knowledge on mega projects. We know that mega projects are very essential for society. With COVID-19, governments rely on infrastructure investment to foster world economies. Mega projects are popular with politicians. It brings political issues to manage, and they are very complex to manage for many reasons. Lots of interactions to carry out the project activities, complexity in terms of innovation and technology to integrate in these mega projects, and as well as a multiple stakeholders with diverse cultural background to manage. But with our book, we wanted to challenge the dominant views on managers of mega projects as super engineers. The book challenges the classical approach for studying mega projects, aimed at enhancing performance, efficiency, effectiveness, cost-benefit ratio. The book is really about the life stories of the mega project leaders we interviewed. So now I pass the floor, or I leave the floor to my friend Alphonse, who will talk about the methodology.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, thank you for crossing the next slide. Actually, we had in this book, we had a topic of, yeah, how do we address this this topic of the personal lives of mega project leaders? And actually, we did so by using a biographical methodology of interviewing. This actually has been very much used in social science, but not so much used in project studies. And the methodology of it is actually that you ask, that you go back into the history of the life of a project manager, going back to his roots, his family, where I've been born, where I've been raised, and yes, yeah, there he is again.
I was trying to close my microphone.
Which was not.
This is what I did. Sorry. So.
I was trying to continue, but so especially looking, actually using this methodology of interviewing a mega project leader, going back in history with the person and trying to unravel the life story. How did you come? Where do you come from? What kind of parents? What kind of values have you learned in your childhood and school? And how did this influence the style of learning and managing this kind of complex mega projects? And so we did so by asking the questions of, how can that be understood? What are the personal views of these managers? Where did they come from? Where they were rooted? How do they influence the leadership? And we had here, you see this list of diverse people coming from the different nations, as Natalie told. Important was that we tried to do as much as possible interviewing in the local language, in the language of the mega project manager themselves, so they could express very quick, very well, I would say in depth, their own history. I did my interview in Dutch, others did in Chinese, other in French. And so you could speak in the local language, which had a major understanding of the project leader. And so these were different projects. These were collected. We did collect it in about between 2017 and 2019 by giving this a large project. Can I have the next one, Natalie? And the most interesting and difficult part was, how do you get so many 18 different scholars all over the world doing more or less the same kind of methodology, following the same kind of questions, and so that we could analyze the different personal life stories from the same perspective. And so that was challenging. We did so by actually handing out a methodological guideline, how to do the interview, what kind of topics to address, how can we do that. And once they were all collected, they were interpreted by the authors themselves on what kind of story they saw in this line of development in this personal story of this megaproject leader. We then collected all of the narratives, all of the stories. But the four of us, we read them, we go through them, and we actually used an analytical framework in which we used both the time in which it was used, the kind of relationship that people were into, both in the earlier stages and in the organization, and in the spatial settings where this project was actually setting in. And we use that from a more perspective of earlier days, where do they come from, and how they are now in the present, and what is their future state. So that was this temporary aspect also in it. So we went through it. We all flew to Oslo for a 2 days meeting together to go through all of the material and to analyze what can be found, what are our interpretations of the data. And again, finally, we go all together separately. We go through these different chapters to provide through multiple reading, actually, to present and describe the final conclusions in the book. It was quite challenging to see so many different stories coming, but actually to make through this analytical framework we could come with quite interesting analysis. I think that will be enough for this method section. I would now give the floor then to Ralph.
Yes, thank you, Alphonse. When it comes to the results, first of all, we need to say we did not ask about technical things. Yeah, we were really on the leader side, on the human side with our questions. So we did not ask whether they use reference class forecasting and these kind of things. So we were more asking questions around how do they organize their day, and what were the interesting points in their life that can be traced back or linked up with the mega projects that they are working in. And from that perspective, we made 4 different types of findings. The first one is a general move towards more human and humanity and humanistic thinking in the management of projects, especially mega projects. Yeah, so building social capital, building even public capital through mega projects. So this awareness is growing and is driving to a large extent the actions of those who are in charge of these projects. The second thing is then increasing ability of mega project leaders to reflect upon their personal experiences. Yeah, so we saw that they have different ways of reflecting, sometimes immediately while they were doing something, sometimes later on when they were explaining things to younger engineers or younger people in the project. So different ways of learning and reflecting came about. Then the third one is the role of the project leaders' experiences and turning points in their life, something that was either very positive or very negative in their life, but changed their attitude and changed their way of moving forward. And the fourth one is the growing awareness of leaders about cultural things, we can say, the multicultural setting in mega projects, how cultures complement each other, how cultures can be streamlined together to do something for the community that the mega project is in. These were roughly the four findings. Coming now on the next four slides to each individual of those four findings, we can say the first one is about the project manager's focus on trust and development of trust within the team, with the stakeholders, with the community they are in. Yeah, so these project managers, they are really focusing on developing a good relationship and developing trust with the people that they are dealing with. That means a general move away from being the administrative, technical type of project leader or project manager to a more humanistic, to a more social person. Yeah, so that the mega project becomes embedded in social action and not social action embedded in a mega project. Yeah. They also said that this trend is quite positive to build a good relationship between the task and the team, which then by itself leads to better results for the project. Yeah. With that in mind, when they were looking for personnel, they were looking for people, of course, who had the right skills and knowledge, but also must have the right personality, the right character and characteristics to fit into the team and to share this more social way of running a project and social way of becoming a very effective team. So that higher social acceptability of projects came along with that. So the communities could easily or were more ready to accept what these teams were building for them. Yeah, and some of the team used used information sharing, regular updates with stakeholders and others to build a good relationship and to integrate the social and the non-financial dimensions of the project to meet the social needs of the project and their stakeholders. Yeah, by way of that, they build social capital, they create well-being, they created prosperity, and with all of that, they created public value. So can we go on to the next slide? Yeah, the other finding, the second finding, was this increasing ability of mega project leaders to reflect upon their personal management styles and their learning. Yeah, so the respondents, they talked about their learning at the front line, yeah, while they were doing things. Others were talking about they feel like they're going from a trained technician to a reflective practitioner who thinks twice about the things that he does and why and in which circumstances this is appropriate what he did or what he does. Yeah. So this type of reflection helped the project managers to accept difficult roles, to accept and think through the complexity of the project, and motivated them to move forward. Yeah. For example, one project manager understood leadership as an act of mindfulness, yeah, where he could retain the big picture while simultaneously working on the details of the projects. Yeah. Some said they learned unprepared, by surprise. Others said they learned through reflection in action while they were doing things. Others said they reflect after action. So it depends very much on the situation that the people are in. But many of them told us that they learned a lot by talking to young engineers and younger team members and explaining the things that they have been through here. So the PMs learn to deal with the public and the private side of the business simultaneously, and through that they become more active and reflective citizens. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, the role of project leaders' experiences and turning points. Yeah, turning points are these situations in life when something happens and it has a big impact on your way forward. Yeah, we had cases where project leaders said, yeah, my grandfather died and that had a big impact on me. And by then I realized that he was right, that I should go back to university and finish my degree and then move on, etc. So these turning points and particular individuals related to these turning points, they often have a high impact on these people. Yeah. So the project leaders, they refer often to wow moments. Yeah. And these wow moments, when somebody has impressed them or something happened that they would call a turning point. Yeah, these wow moments, they often become the center of their talks, the center of their narratives. So they build their story when they explain something. They build their story around these turning points, more or less to explain it to themselves, so that we were just listeners on the side. They were more explaining to themselves what happened in their life than they were explaining it to us. Yeah. So examples of these wow moments that were given to us were, for example, the experience of a mega project leader in his first mega project, yeah, building this huge thing, having all these different influences from political to technical, etc. And that influenced his career. And from that moment on, after he had worked in this first mega project, it was clear to him that he wanted to spend the rest of his life in these types of projects. Interestingly, in the literature, this is called the narrative capital of project managers. Yeah, to what extent can project managers really articulate what drives them, and what are the turning points, the wow moments that make project management life very interesting. Yeah, some of them even wrote books about it. Others did a self-reflective PhD thesis about it. So they did not hold back with their learnings. They published that as well. Yeah. So in sum, we can say leaders are those who can narrate authentic stories of their own identity. And then let's move on to the fourth slide, which is about the growing awareness of leaders on project culture and cultural differences. Yeah, culture, they said, enables meaningful connection with the team members and the stakeholders. So the interactions between them, but also the sensitivity that some people might have other values than we have. Yeah, this type of sensitivity helps to build up relationships and to better understand each other. Yeah, they also told us that an alliance culture where we foster this type of fingertip feeling for different cultures, yeah, that foster the inter-organizational collaboration. For example, in a project in Sydney, yeah, they said the many different cultures that came together in that project made it happen. Yeah, by having people with very different value sets, yeah, we make sure that we cover almost anything that's needed to be covered. And so culture helped to develop a sense of unity, especially in difficult situations. And the leaders, they typically acknowledge the cultural differences, and some of them use them for innovative ways of team building, or to, for example, to create a community mission in one of the projects they were working in. Okay, and with that, I want to hand over to Shankar. Shankar, you are on mute.
Yeah, I'm on mute now. Thank you, Ralph, and thank you, Juliana, for organizing this wonderful book club. And thanks to all the 37 attendees who are here. Hello, everyone from Australia, which is almost midnight now, just past midnight. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is that what are the skills required by mega project managers before we talk about the impact of mentoring, is that we found that not only technical skills, but also financial skills, because a mega project have a lot of investment. They need to have temporal skills, which means they need to know the timing, when to take decisions, when to move in particular areas. Political skills, they have to know about politics, because often these are sponsored by government and politicians take decisions which might affect their projects. And then social, they have to think about teams within the project, the internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders, which are the stakeholders outside the project who are affected. They also need to communicate at several layers, not only internally, but externally. They have to be able to build trust so that people will trust them to do the job. They have to also innovate. Lots of mega projects often have issues, and innovative solutions have to be found. They have to know about culture, as Ralph has mentioned about culture. It's not only the project culture, the national culture, multicultural values. They also have to have political skills, as I mentioned. So where do they learn these things from? Of course, they learn on the job. They also learn from mentors. So the mentors help leaders to build self-esteem, because mega project leaders have to be confident and show confidence as well. And awareness, that's bringing into emotional intelligence, insight, professional skills. Some of them learned managing projects from other project managers. And also some people used mindfulness, use of karma yoga, the reduction of stress, because working on a mega project is very stressful. And one of the mega project leaders said, I don't take things very seriously. If I take things very seriously, I'll become stressed. So, and who are these mentors? These mentors could be parents. It could be grandfathers sometimes. It could be senior members in the organization, teachers, and in some cases there were neighbors. For example, Graham Campbell from Australia, he used to play tennis, Mr. Spooner. Mr. Spooner became his mentor, because what Graham found was while his parents were very interested in his education, they were very busy. So they were kind of absent parents. In the case of Sean Sweeney from New Zealand, he lost his parents early in life. So he was brought up by an uncle. The uncle became his mentor, and uncle became also project manager as well. The other story, in another story in China, where China is very special, because most of the mega project leaders in China are young people compared to other mega project leaders we met. And one leader who was managing a big tunnel project in Dalian, he was a young manager who worked under another mega project manager who built this from the China, the mainland China to Macau to Hong Kong, the big link, and he was working under him, and then he became so he learned a lot from his experience with the other mega project manager. Can you turn the slide, please? And also, Ralph mentioned about values, and the values are, where do they learn their values? Several leaders were coming from working class background. For example, Graham Campbell, Sean Sweeney, Mark Thurston, Yong Ling, another leader from Korea. They all came from working class background. And interestingly, many of them did not get into education in the early years, and then they came back and did their masters in engineering, which was also an interesting one. But sometimes the mentor helped them to come back and do education and the desire to learn. Then religious background somehow made some difference. There were this formation of values, such as someone had a Roman Catholic mother. There was Graham said he has a Protestant ethic. And there was the influence of the Bhagavad Gita on Karma Yoga. So all these religious ideas also had an impact. And the value from local leaders in which they grew up. That means, for example, Schaber from Germany. She comes from the pragmatic society of Germany, where hard work, honesty, being very direct, these are very important. And being very direct helped us to manage your stakeholders as well. And some mega project managers emulated family values. For example, in India, Mr. Dixit said we should all live together. So he built accommodation for all the people who were working on the project. At the project site, he said we should work together and learn together. And I worked on projects in India. We often do that. We have our own accommodation right next to the construction site. And Graham, for example, they had were building this pipeline in the desert. So they had to have all the workers moving from one place to the other. It was like shifting a hotel from one place to the other as the pipeline was built. Can you please go to the next slide? The other thing that was also interesting was the idea of place. Okay, the place where they worked a project. For example, Graham said that he is an Australian project manager. He worked in Indonesia. He worked in Middle East, but he went to HUFCO to work with HUFCO in the US. And he found that the attitude of the American project manager quite different from Australian project manager. Australian project manager tend to be more conservative. The American project managers allowed him to do a lot of things. He actually, in very early days, built a network so that everybody can communicate. Nowadays, networks are common, but in those days, networks were not. And they allowed him to have this networks. And when he came back to Australia, he brought that American spirit back to Australia and set up his own company to finance a mega project. And other thing is they influence the leaders to demonstrate, to find creative and innovative ways. This was also interesting. For example, in the case of Mr. Dixit, he had this issue with two his mega project was building, Metro Rail was building a station. There was another railway going on in India, and they had to build a station. They were all clashing. And then Mr. Dixit felt was, the government said, why don't you reroute your mega? And he said, no, that's not going to happen. So he went and collected people like the legal people, the community, and they made a case. And so sometimes they use this kind of ideas to get the government to agree. So they had to use a lot of innovate. But for example, Schaber had to decide that she had to shut down the big highways in Germany, and she had to convince the stakeholders that that's the way to go. So innovation was very important for them as well. Thank you. Next. Now, what can we as practitioners learn from them? Okay, so this is the life stories themselves, because one of the things we found, and as Alphonse explained the methodology, we found that even though these mega project leaders from different cultures, different countries, there is some common threads. So you can actually learn some common things about mega project leaders. Remember that Ed Hoffman, who published his book about stories to train project managers in NASA. So we can actually use this book on the life stories to learn about mega project. The other thing is the leaders also became aware of their own experiences, and they tried to explain their experiences. For example, Graham wrote his own biography. Ruiter did his PhD on the mega project, and Graham goes and talks to the engineering society, and he feels that engineers must actually go and talk to young engineers to encourage them. And the other thing is about being transparent by opening up this is important, because you can't, one of the things that we found in the case of the Indian mega project, as well as some projects in Australia, that they want the citizens to know what's going on, so that citizens will support the project and feel that it is part of their project, so that the transparency is very important. You can't hide the mega project behind fences. It should be transparent. For example, in Sydney now, we are doing a big modification in the city. and the construction site is open, and so that people can see this is new metro rail is going to be built. Of course, when the construction becomes unsafe, they close it, but they get the people to feel that this project is going to be useful to them. I think that probably ends my presentation, and we are ready for questions now. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you all for all the contributions. We have several questions received in advance, and I'm sure there are others, very interesting ones in the Q&A box. So if you have others, please keep them coming to inform our discussion. If I could start with a question to Natalie. So the book talks a lot about authentic leaders. Yeah, that seems to be sort of a language and a feature of those leaders that you are really building upon in the book. So perhaps if we could start with the other way around. So what are the features of the not so authentic leaders, and perhaps how do they develop themselves over time from not so authentic to become more authentic leaders?
That's a very interesting question and a surprising one, because do we want to become a non-authentic leader, or we want to become an authentic leader? But what I can tell you, Giuliano, is that there's a very good article written by Peter Sims he published this article in HBR in 2007. And he says that no one can be authentic by trying to imitate someone else. So people trust, when you are genuine, where you are authentic or you are true, this is how we can classify you as an authentic leader. But if you try to copy the values of someone else, if you want to imitate someone else, so this is, or maybe you want to surpass someone else. So this is some characteristic of someone who is non-authentic. You're not true, you're not real. And these leaders also, when you're an authentic leader, you try to learn by your life stories, you learn by your experience, you learn by turning points in your life, and you integrate that in your personality, and you manage accordingly to your values. So if you are non-authentic and try to copy leaders, then how can you manage that part? Because you don't capitalize or don't leverage your own experience. So this is, I prefer to focus on how to become during a long journey, during your life. How can you become an authentic leader? And this is what we discuss a lot in our presentation. Values, walk the talk, being very authentic, being true, put in the middle, in the center of your management, the teams, not only putting the spotlight on your career, on your ambition, but really managing, bringing your team to follow you. And this is what we observe, in the profiles of our leaders that were authentic. And I hope that people who are starting their life not being authentic will read the book and learn that it is important to be true, and it is important to be honest in front of your people. And this is how people will trust you. This is how people will see in you, will respect you, and will be able to follow you. So I don't know if I answer your question directly, but I prefer, as I mentioned to you, not to focus too much on the non-authentic. I like the question. I find it very interesting. But the book really brings some characteristics of authentic people, or how can you develop your authenticity? And this is important.
Perfect. No, that's a great answer, Natalie. Thanks for the insight. If we could move on to Alphonse next, on a question between this longevity of megaprojects and the transition perhaps of different CEOs and directors, and one CEO taking over from another, and things like that. So is there a pattern that perhaps could be identified by different phases? Is there something that you perceived through the life stories?
Yeah, thank you, Julia, for this question. We see that this transition from one stage to another stage in a mega project is always problematic, and it has to do with change of CEOs or change of teams, the teams that have a certain focus on in a certain phase of on planning or on stakeholders, and once they transform to the execution phase, and then there is a different focus upon construction of a mega project, for example. And we see different leadership. So in the earlier stages of when things still have to become are political, you know, there are different options of tracks, or different. There's resistance among the citizens, for example. So you need then a leader that is really close. I would say someone who is sensitive to the political game, somebody who is sensitive in terms of, well, who can tell a story that people trust, and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and we promise you that this will not lead to overspending or budget overspending or time. So that's the one. And we see that those people are frequently the kind of people that they know how to tell a story. But then when you go to the execution phase, we see a different type of people that are more team players, more people that need all kinds of experts working together in a more holistic way of connecting each other. And then you really need a person that is able to connect these people, but also to connect the project to society, to the stakeholders, being able to follow it. So yes, we see that there's actually the different stages of a mega project, especially the very long-term ones. We see different capabilities of leadership coming across. And I've seen project managers being too long in a phase, for example, that they, you say, okay, this is not the right guy because he's really good in the political game, in the managing of the stakeholders, but he's less good into creating a team because he's too much of an ego, for example. And other way around, that an engineered type of mega project manager is too early, not able to really play the political game. And so yes, I think it has value to rethink: am I the right manager in the right time of a mega project, in the right position, or am I too early, or am I too late? And I know this is well, for many people this is a problem.
It is a huge challenge. Well, that's a fantastic answer. Thanks, Alphonse. I have one here for Ralph, and perhaps a combination of two questions. You already discussed several features and social features of those leaders, Ralph, and perhaps building upon Alphonse's insight on the stakeholder management perspective. So if we understand leaders managing inside and outside, perhaps the external environment in different levels, what would be sort of your reflections for that particular part of the external stakeholder management perspective of those leaders and the social skills they might need to have?
Yeah, when it comes to social skills, there are, of course, a few that pop up immediately. But before I get into that, let me just make a short contribution to what we said earlier about authentic leadership and leadership as such. There's a very old definition of what leadership is, and that goes along the lines of leadership is being yourself with style. Yeah, and what authentic leadership is exactly this. Yeah, it's just being yourself. Yeah, and as long as you come across as you're being yourself, people have no problem following you. Yeah, but if you don't do it, have a problem following you. Coming back to your question on the social side, how to deal with stakeholders and what social skills should the leaders develop. there are two that pop up immediately. The first one is empathy. Yeah, if we look at leadership from the perspective of social intelligence and emotional intelligence, then social intelligence is very much linked to leadership as such. And the most important individual element in social intelligence is empathy. Yeah, empathy, the ability to put yourself into the shoes of the other person and see the world from this particular angle. That does not mean that we have to accept what the other people say and recommend and want to do. It is just that we understand where they come from. And that makes a big impact, because once we understand their viewpoint, we can always work on compromises, we can work on arguments where we might move two perspectives together into a new one. We can build up our own arguments if that is needed. So the empathy allows us to identify what can be done to rescue a situation or to master a situation. It also allows us to identify what is the most appropriate leadership style in this very moment. Yeah, once I can read the other person, yeah, and I see the body language, I see the arguments, I can understand where the thinking of that person comes from, then I can make a decision for myself. Shall I be more democratic here? Shall I be more of a leader? Or shall I be more of a manager and say, no, we have the numbers and the numbers tell us we have to do this? Yeah. So this ability to read the other person and understand where the other person comes from is a very important one, especially when we deal with team members and stakeholders. The second thing that came across in all these interviews was the building of trust. Trust with the team, trust through the team, etc. It is also interesting then to see how does that build up? How does trust by the team and through the team build up in the first place? And there is a common denominator among those mega project leaders that we saw, and that was that they all were very good team players at one point in their life. Yeah, and some of them continued with that either in sports or playing in a band and these kind of things. But what they had in common is whatever they did as a team player, they become very good in it, so that the team started to follow them. Yeah, and then they became the leader almost automatically. Yeah, but through this development, we have two effects. One is that the team trusts in the leader because they know him. Yeah, but also the reverse effect, that the leader trusts the team because he or she knows the team. Yeah, and another common denominator across all these interviews was that these mega project leaders, they rely so heavily on their team. Yeah, they never try to be the big hero and try to solve things by themselves. They always refer to the team and said, my trust is in the team, they can master it. Yeah. So empathy is one thing, building trust and maintaining trust is another side of the social characteristics that we should develop in mega project leaders.
Perfect, and that brings me to Shankar on a very nice way in terms of this. Sometimes it's disconnected, the top management and the team delivering different phases of the mega project, and the selection of those leaders in the top management team. Sometimes it might be more connected with the super engineer concept than a selection based on how you are with people. So I was wondering, Shankar, if you could reflect on that this disconnection, and perhaps would there be a way of selecting future leaders with a more balanced approach between human skills and technical skills beyond the traditional way?
You're on mute, Shankar.
The idea of the super engineer, I think engineers are not robots. They are rational people, but they also have human skills. I was an engineer myself, and when I became a manager, I realized that it's not going to work because one of my bosses told me that don't carry a spanner in your pocket. That's what he told me. So I realized that I can't carry my spanner. That to be given to somebody else. So I think the leaders, actually engineers actually can learn, because one of the good things about engineers is that they learn analytical skills. So they can analyze a situation and say, this requires more human skills. So they can actually apply human skills where it's required. But they're also, most of these projects require technical skills as well. So they will have to understand where the technical skills are important and where the social skills and the stakeholder skills are important. But one of the things we found with most of these mega project managers is that except for, as I mentioned, China, where the engineer is out of the college, is put into a mega project, manage a mega project. In most of the other stories, the engineers actually had lots of experience in projects. So they're not fresh engineers working in project or highly technical. They had been groomed into managing a mega project over a period of time when they had actually exposed to these skills. And I think almost in all the stories, we also found that there is no difference between their importance of teams. Like Ralph mentioned, almost in every story, we found that the teams become very important. Okay, and so that for example, the manager from India, Dikshit, I was sitting in that interview with Ashwin. He said team. So I think and he was the CEO. He was actually the top manager, because one of the things that happens in mega project is the mega project managers themselves are CEOs. There is no CEO above them. For example, the Dikshit was a CEO, Mr. Thurston was a CEO. Their bosses are probably political, okay, because they are the government who is sponsoring the project. So the team is between the mega project leader and the people working in the project, but they also form kind of teams with stakeholders, which means that they link themselves with stakeholders, and they are quite aware that the stakeholders would get a support for this. So they have social events in which these kind of stakeholders come to the project and have mixed with them. So I think I feel that while several of these mega project managers are super engineers, they are also humanistic managers, which is what we found. Does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. And I'm very conscious of time as well. So we'll try to finish in the British style here, sharp on time. I should say the German style. But we have a very interesting question, perhaps, to have reflections from all of you in your final considerations together. Tim is asking here about the inclusivity and the new agenda, the more stronger agenda around a range of issues that we are observing in different countries. So perhaps one very open question for you guys would be, how do you see those leaders creating or fostering an environment within the mega project and across, with different levels above them as well? But how do they, what's their role really to create and support greater inclusivity in mega projects?
Natalie is our leader.
But I think Ralph or Alphonse can start, and I can add things.
Well, if I shall start, then I would say attitude is a very important aspect. Yeah. So if these leaders have the right attitude of fostering inclusiveness and fostering cultural diversity in order to more or less streamline it towards the common goal. Yeah, I think that has a big impact, and that is also seen by our other studies that we do. Even quantitatively, we could see that these attitudes, they have a bigger impact on project success than, for example, personality of project managers. Yeah, so attitudes are very important.
Yeah, I can add to that actually our mega projects are already inclusive in terms of the project that I see are very multicultural, are very much working with people all over the world. And if you're not open to ideas coming from other parts of the world, you're lost, because it is an important attitude, as you said, important competence, that you're able to learn to work together in different settings and with different experts coming from different fields. And this will be increasingly be the case. So it will be increasingly be more complex, and we have to deal with lots of, new questions to address. And those will be, I think those will be needed, that we include more intercultural and more inclusiveness in this kind of projects. And so I think they have already been, and they already are very much intercultural and inclusive, but much more on expertise coming from all over the world.
And if I can add to that as well, is lots of them talk about the open doors policy. So to foster an environment, one leader, a Canadian leader, said that I want the people to come to me. I don't want the people to be afraid of me. I want people to come to me, and if they have a problem, share it with me, and share it with the team. And in sharing your problem, it is like wearing a load on your back. So it's much better when the load on your back is on many shoulders than only 2 shoulders. So this is the attitude, as Ralph mentioned, the inclusivity of cultural, the importance of culture, and on top of it, the honesty. You are honest in integrating diversity, different cultures in the environment, and you want your people to understand that you're honest and you respect them. So this is also additional threats that could be used to answer your question.
Yeah, I can add to that by saying that I can take the example of the Australian project manager who had to build a pipeline across the desert. And a lot of these places, the land belonged to the indigenous people, and the indigenous people are very conscious about their land. So he had to always have them consult with them before digging up the land, because it may be a land which is spiritual. So I think mega project leaders are also conscious about such things, that if you are interfering into indigenous community, and many mega project managers also are very inclusive about they select their teams not based on race or religion. They select their teams based on capability. So they want good people to work. So the selection is based on merit. Okay? This is one of the things. And in one particular case, I remember one of the things they say is that we want honest people. So they actually have an ethical contract with them. So this kind of processes which they use make it very, very important to be inclusive, as well as make sure that the project doesn't interfere with other things. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm sure we could still keep the discussion alive and running for at least another hour, given how many questions we have and the interesting topics you're raising. But on behalf of the IPMA team, I would just like to thank you for joining us today and sharing such a high-level presentation and insights on your contributions. I don't have any doubts that the book and the topic on mega project leaders will inspire future research and really make a contribution to leaders through different and rich stories that you put together to reflect on how they act and how they are driving really and inspiring their own teams in Megaprojects. So thanks again for joining us, and for everyone who attended this session. Keep connected with us. We have future events, and this session will be shared with you, available as soon as possible. And until the next Megaproject Book Club, bye for now, and have a good day ahead of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.